and welcome back to yet another exciting week of the Lazy Money Game. In this week's episode, I'm going to go through a thought experiment and then I will reflect a little upon the results there, which actually led me to think that perhaps there was something that I have missed in the beginning when I made this channel. And then afterwards, I will give a portfolio update as well. So without further hesitation, let's immediately go to the core of the problem. This is a webpage called Market Screener, and if you look up a company like Microsoft, then you will get information like this. If you have never done any investing and you simply just look up a company on a webpage like this, then you will see this very complicated chart. There's all these numbers, and then you will immediately be very scared and say, I don't understand anything of this. How do I actually get started with investing? Well, that actually starts a completely different place. So let me start a completely different place, namely with this little mental exercise. When you look at this manual, then you would probably be thinking, how much will I pay you to follow this manual? I mean, step number 1, push button 3 for 5 seconds. Step number 2, push button 6 for 1 second. Step number 3, push button 3 and 5 for 6 seconds, and so on and so forth, all the way through this manual. Well, if you think of the question like this, then you are probably not aware of that I will actually ask you, how much are you willing to pay me to follow this manual? Because what you're looking at is a joystick from Nintendo for the most popular game, Super Mario Bros. So the question should actually be, how much are you willing to pay me to follow this sequence of buttons and seconds that you have to press those buttons? This is of course heavily inspired by a TED talk that I saw. I will of course include a link in the description below. But the important thing for me to mention here is it really depends on how you view the problem, whether you think it's something that will pay you or if you think it's something that you will have to pay for. So one of the things that I realized from this mental experiment was, well, perhaps I actually started at level 5 instead of starting from level 1, just to keep it in this gamification language. Because a prerequisite to actually start with investing is knowing how to make a budget, or at least knowing if your income is exceeding your expenses, so you are in a place where you actually have money to invest. So just to give a short introduction here, I mean, this is the most simple budget that I can come up with. You have your total income and you have your total expenses, and then you do it on a monthly basis and on an annual basis. And if those two matches out, well, then there's nothing left to invest. So one of the things that I actually want to achieve with this channel is making more people financially independent. So if I have not included how to make a budget, I'm simply eliminating a lot of people who are not in a place where they can start investing. So I will allow myself to just spend some minutes on this video on how to make a simple budget. And one of the things most people realize when they make a budget is, oh, do I actually spend this much money on a car or to travel? There's always something that surprises people on how much they are actually spending. And if you know what you're spending your money on, then you will typically start to be more wise with your money and spend the money on what you actually want to do. So if we just scroll down, then I have made a simple budget here. The first rule that I want to impose is always pay yourself first. And what do I mean by that? So we start by having our income. Let me start by saying these are not my numbers. I have simply just put in some numbers so you have some numbers to work with. So let's say you have salary where you gain 4,000 a month. You have a side hustle where you gain 50, and then you have some passive income. These are my numbers from my average passive income this year, so I thought I could use those. That gives a total income of $4,215, and that gives annually $50,580. If we then continue here, the most important thing to pay out first if you have any debt, if it's student loans or if it's credit cards or anything like that, I would start by paying as much as I possibly can into that. But since I'm not in a position where I have any loans, I continue down, and then I say the second most important thing to do is investing. So if you don't have an emergency fund, then you should start by building an emergency fund. If you have an emergency fund, then start by doing some retirement contribution. Usually there's a lot of tax benefit by doing so. The next thing I would do is make an investment account, and every single month put money into that account as the first thing you do every month. So the reason why I have chosen to add savings and investments into the expenses is I truly believe in this concept of paying yourself first. That is also why the grand total up here goes to zero, because if there were any additional money left, they will simply go into the savings and investments. If we then continue here, then the first thing I would say is household. Well, rent and mortgage, insurance, maintenance, internet, utilities, and phone. And I still do this on a monthly and an annual basis. How many categories we are using and how fine-tuned you want to do it really depends on your personality. It's not too important for me how you do it, just that you have some sort of overview when you are doing it. I'm simply presenting a simple and fairly easy way to understand it. If we then continue to the next category, then we have food, and I mean eating home, eating out. Usually I would say it's much cheaper to buy groceries and make your own food at home than eating out, so you should try and prioritize eating the most meals at home. If we continue down to transportation, then I have added car and gas. Then you have public transportation, bicycle, and maintenance. At least where I'm living, it's quite common that people use a bicycle as the main form of transportation, and it actually saves you a lot of money, because having a car and having insurance and paying for gas on a car is something that is really expensive. And the next category is something like personal care, where you will have dentist bills, there will be medication, you probably need a haircut from time to time, you should also wear some clothes, and you hopefully have some sort of sports activity, whether it's a gym membership or whatever it is. And then I have added gifts here, because from time to time you will go and attend birthday parties or Christmas parties or other forms of celebration, so you should include that as well. And then entertainment and travel. I mean, I spend a lot of money on vacations and traveling when we are not having a year as we are having currently. And then I have added subscriptions as well, because as you have heard before, I really like this thing about having Disney Plus or Netflix or HBO or something similar to that. And then you end up with an income versus expenses, and then you have the total income and the total expenses and a grand total. And then the last key metric that you should focus on is what is your savings rate then. Because if you look to the total investments in this example, they were 2,000, since there was 1,000 into a retirement contribution and 1,000 into an investment account. So how do you end up with a savings rate? You simply take your investments and then you divide by your total income, and now you know your savings rate. So why are these numbers important, and why is it particularly interesting to know your savings rate? Well, let me show you a calculator and let me explain why. So if we look at this calculator, I will of course include a link in the description below. If we punch in the numbers from the example, there was a current annual income of $50,580, a savings of $24,000 per year, which meant that there was an annual expense of $26,580, giving a current savings rate of 48%. If we then say that your portfolio has a value of 10,000 today, meaning that you already have 10,000 invested, and then we have two very critical assumptions here, that you expect to have an annual return on investment of 5% and a withdrawal rate once you retire of 4%. Then with these numbers, you would be able to retire in 17.1 years, and this is of course under the assumption that you will continue to use the same amount of cash as you are currently doing. And here we can actually also see how the savings rate are for some different countries, meaning the United Kingdom, the United States, Germany, France, and so on and so forth. And if we continue down here, we can actually see how our investment will grow and how large of a percentage could be covered by our return of investments for the portfolio. And that means when we reach this 17th year, then we would be capable of living from our portfolio with the current withdrawal rate of 4%. So what happens if we play around with these numbers? For instance, if we take the portfolio value that I have, close to $90,000, and see how much that will change, well, that will cut off 3 years of this example, meaning that you will be capable of retiring after 14 years instead. But how about if we were perhaps a little more cautious and said, well, we only expect to have a 3% return on our investments? Well, then you would have to add 2.8 years, meaning that you will be able to retire in close to 20 years. But I think it makes more sense if you go and play around with these numbers, which are much more personalized to your situation. So I will leave the link in the description below as mentioned. So now that I have showed you how to make a simple budget and why some of the numbers are actually important in order to know your financial independence number, please let me know in the comments down below how you think about a simple budget like this and if you actually think it's something that is helpful to you. So let's continue to a portfolio update. The first thing we notice is that there is a green circle for this week's episode, so we know that the portfolio is up in value. If we then go to the portfolio value tab, we can see that I'm up $3,300 compared to last week. And if we go back to the overview, we can see that the cost has not increased, meaning that I have not done any new investments. And if we scroll up just to take a look at the entire portfolio, we can see that there has now been added a new stock. I have added Beatrice, and since it was a spin-off from Pfizer, I simply just had to add a dollar amount in the investment because otherwise these numbers would not make sense because you cannot divide by 0. And that is why the percentage change over here looks so ridiculous. I mean, I could have put any number in here, 1 cent or $1. I simply just have to input something different from 0. And as we can start to see here, more and more companies are coming back into the green territory. And that is of course really promising for me because at some point when my portfolio was at the lowest value, I think I was actually down more than 50% at some point. And now I'm only down a little less than 7%. And just to roast a couple of the other finance YouTubers which I have seen this very popular trend about thumbnails with "look how much money I have made in November for my portfolio." Well, first of all, most of those people have probably not sold their stocks, meaning that they have not made that money yet. This is simply just market fluctuations, but unfortunately, people will click on it and watch those videos and think I can do the same, instead of actually sitting down, doing analysis and focusing on the long-term game instead, which I personally think is much more important. Unfortunately, thumbnails saying, "oh, look how I made this quick and easy cash," sells much better. And what I actually find particularly interesting is it's typically the same YouTubers who will not show you how much their portfolio is down in value whenever that happens. That is why it is so key for me to share both the ups and the downs, so you can simply follow the journey. There is no information hidden here. Speaking of things which are important, let's go and take a closer look at the dividends tab, because now that November has finally closed, we can see that I have received more than $300, and that is actually the highest amount of dividends that I have received within a single month within the lifespan of this portfolio. And if we look to December, we can see that I'm already on a good track here, since I have received more than $50 within this week. And if we look to the quarterly results, we can see that I made $466 in Q3 and I have already made $420 in Q4. So I would expect my Q4 results to beat my Q3, because if we take a look at what I received in September, I made $212. I would expect to receive around the same number here in December. So it is really going in the right direction. So before I get too much carried away with only sharing positive news and actually becoming what I don't like to see, namely one who is just sharing, oh, look how easy it is and look how much money I have made. Let's share some news which actually matters, namely the king of key figures, meaning the US non-farm payrolls, which was out Friday this week. And unfortunately, there was only created 245,000 new jobs in November, which was much below the consensus estimate of around 450 to 500,000 jobs. And according to analysts, it will now take around 2 years before the US economy will be back to the level it was at the beginning of the year. And I will of course include a link in the description below for this website as well. I have shared it on many other episodes, but I think it's still important to at least keep track of this key figure. So now that I have shown you the relationship between a very popular Nintendo game and my investment philosophy, or at least the way that I try to share and show my content here on YouTube, hopefully I will be more successful having people looking at investing like if they were looking at a joystick for Nintendo instead of looking through the manual, so that more people will claim this financial independence and perhaps reach level 8. I've actually made a short video about financial independence levels. You can click on the link in the top here. Perhaps that would be a good next video to watch. So in general, if you like content like this, please remember to give me a thumbs up or leave a comment or subscribe. It really helps out the channel. And until I see you next Sunday, bye!